Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host Orvice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass. We have an absolute pleasure hosting two guests of us today. First of all, we have Shimon. Shimon is the CEO and co-founder of Dattree, where they prevent misconfigurations in Kubernetes workloads. Also, Shimon is involved in many developer communities as an AWS community hero and a CNCF chapter organizer. The other guest that we have with us today is Danny. Danny is a DevRel for We Are Developers who claims he cannot get cancelled on Twitter. So without any further ado, I'm glad to have you all on this show. And I think we should just start off and kick off with our first fact of today. So, Or, if you want to kind of lead that one and tell us the fact that you have for us today.
Yeah, so the first fact is mine, and my fact is that the internet weighs about 60 grams, or for our US audience, about 2 ounces. So they made the calculation. If you take down all the energy, all the electrons that spin around in the internet as we use it, as this thing is alive, it boils down, if you plug it into E equals MC squares, it boils down to about 60 grams. And I think it's in general very interesting to think about the connection between the world of software, the virtual world, the cyber world that we're creating, and how it connects or translates to the physical world that we live in. And something to think about in that regard is also the carbon emissions, how we go from running that software to the impacts that we have on our world. So if you didn't know, a kind of a sub fact here, all of your main clouds, GCP, Azure, AWS, they have guides and tools that enable you to gauge how much carbon, how much emissions your AWS accounts emits. And just as comparison, you as a human being, when you just live around your day, you emit about 500 liters of carbon emissions, which is about 1 kilogram, or for our US audience, about 3.3 pounds. So that's the amount of carbon, 10 kilograms, it's the amount of carbon that you emit as a human being. And I couldn't find an average figure for a cloud, for an AWS account, for example, but I did find an example from Jeff Barr, who is kind of a lead person in AWS, and he measured his carbon emissions on his account at about 10 kilograms a day, which is 10 times more than Barr himself.
So you're telling me that every time I wake up, I do my daily tasks, I sit down to work and I go through a whole day of work, the whole 8 hours, and I go back to sleep, I've produced a kilogram of gas, like emissions, carbon emissions, just out of plain air. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So in general, where do you think, like when you lose weight, where does all of that mass go? So a lot of people think like when you go to the bathroom or you sweat it out, but no, what happens is you breathe it out.
You sweat, you go to the toilet.
So no, what happens is you breathe it out. So think about, you plant a plant in the ground. It's something small, then it grows into a huge tree. Where does all that mass come from? It's not like sucking it from the ground. There's not a hole in the ground afterwards. It sucks it from the air, compounds it with light energy, and creates a new plant, a new tree, with all that mass coming from the carbon in the air.
Well, the tree breathed it out.
Yeah, that's the point.
I totally agree. As a person that is constantly in a weight loss attempt, I can say that I sometimes weigh myself before I go to sleep, and then I weigh myself when I wake up, and it's like 1 kilogram less. And it's crazy. And
That's a mistake.
I didn't do anything, and I lost 1 kilogram. So you can check it out in your home. Weigh yourself before you go to bed and after you wake up.
That's very motivating. I'll definitely, if I'm down on ego, I'll definitely do that.
So talking about saving on weight, saving on energy, I think in general, this is a very interesting discussion about how we as engineers affect the world, how we can optimize so the things that we're building will save on carbon emissions, will save on energy, and not just on our billings and costs.
So I would argue that running on, modern workloads that auto scale up and down is actually better, because instead of having not utilized servers running at 10% CPU, you only use what you need. But then you have the problem with spot instances, which you always over optimize, and you run it over capacity because it's like 90% discount.
So I'm wondering now, because we've touched on that point. So not everyone, or a lot of developers in their space, are not really maybe fully familiar with, making sure that all of their work is optimized. So essentially, every developer every day is kind of wasting resources that, can't be fetched back again, right? Because optimization is, in some ways so difficult.
Yeah, so optimization is hard, and doubly so, because you're not only optimizing for how your code and systems are running in the cloud, you also need to optimize for building for the cloud, the architecture, the testing time, the energy you expend as a human, the carbon emissions that you have working on figuring this out. So this equation is not that easy. It's not as easy to figure out how you optimize for your cloud.
So I have a fun fact about that, Or. So I met a friend from South Africa, and he said that he's working on starting a business. And I said, what is this business? He said, I'm building a farm. And I'm like, that's amazing. What are you going to grow in this farm? He says, I'm going to grow emissions. And I'm like, what? Yes, emission credits. And I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, listen. So you can plant down plants that produce a negative emissions, and then you get credits. And then your actual crops is not the things that you grow. It's actually you go and you sell the credits to other companies that pollute and need the credit. So I was like, so what do you do with the plants themselves?
They just continue growing.
Yeah, so big companies, a lot of times because of regulation, they need to meet certain footprints. They need to negate their carbon emissions. So one way, instead of actually reducing their emissions, is to get credits, get other companies to reduce the carbon emissions or remove carbon from the air. And a lot of times it can be as funny as paying a preserve, like a reservation, not to cut down their trees. So you get points for just keeping the trees there. In general, it's a very, very complex and weird world.
Cool, very, very interesting. And I mean, I'd love to kind of take you back on the first kind of fact that you gave us as a question. And you said that the whole internet has been weighed, right? Was that what you've mentioned?
Right. It's not an exact calculation, right?
Well, of course. But are we certain it's somewhat accurate?
Yeah, it's based on physics, based on E equals MC square. You take the overall electricity running, and that's what they use for the calculation here. So again, it's not exact, but you get the rough figure. Those 60 grams are a good estimate of the right size.
Speaking of which, I have a very interesting fact for you guys. Did you know that, I believe it was 1957, that 5 megabytes of data used to actually weigh 1 ton of mass. And the thing here is that computers back then were so huge that they just needed all this bare metal to occupy for the memory. And I find it so interesting that now we have our mirrorless Sony cameras. We can just snap one picture, and suddenly that can be 50 megabytes of data just for one image. And previously, throw it back 50, 60 years, and we've been dealing with such huge masses for machines to process such little data. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and you also need to think about how this impacts our work. Like the fact that you have more memory space, the fact that you have stronger computers, more CPU, that changes the way you build software. And that changes the way new software needs to be built. So it creates new expectations. So we need now to build more complex software. It's really thinking about the times that I began as a software engineer, where I had to deliver a physical computer, all the work around that, all the carbon emissions around that changed with the move to the cloud dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's all cool. I'd love to kind of squeeze out a fact from Danny now. I know you came in with some interesting thoughts here. So what is your fact for us?
My interesting fact I mention almost all the time is the hype surrounding dark mode, that it's not necessarily better for your eyes, actually. versus light mode. Please don't kick me off this podcast. I think for us techies, especially working late at night in a poorly lit room, our eyes prefer darkness around us, right? Because it's easier then to focus, so to speak. Scientifically speaking, focusing, your eyes don't really focus on a black background with white or bright text. It's actually much harder for us to focus, and our eyes then get tired. We also blink less. On average, blink a minute to 15 maybe. While we stare at the screen, it decreases to around 4 to 3. So dry eyes, diluted pupils when looking at dark backgrounds, acute focus loss, and all of that gets us headaches, bad vision, and many, many more aspects, right? So this whole thing that Zach started about dark mode needs to be really spoken about, because we have a lot of developers who either have wrist pains or headaches, and those mostly come from not blinking enough and also looking too much at dark mode. Now this, of course, depends also, right? If you're in a really dark room at night and you're looking at a bright screen, that also does not help you go to sleep, etc. So I think we need to balance that out just a little bit. But I mentioned this once on Twitter, and oh boy, I do not recommend starting a war. Just say dark mode looks the best, feels the best, yeah.
Careful not to get canceled on Twitter or something.
People were close. Yeah, good thing I'm not. I'm not from America, so canceling us is not as easy. But yeah, that was very, very close. Yeah, the tweet got shared by some big accounts as well, and my inbox was looking juicy. Let's say. Yeah.
So one of the problems is we don't blink enough. So maybe we can do a blink recognition software, and those things that tell you that you don't drink enough. So you can have a blinkometer, and it will let me know that I need to blink when I use dark mode.
Sounds like something out of Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, because we actually tried to make this when I was in London doing computer science. We tried to make a startup based on the whole health and ergonomics thingy. And when we approached companies and investors, they were not happy with the fact that there's a camera staring at your face, counting how many times you blink.
And having said that, we're still in front of the camera all day if we work from home.
Listen, we are all engineers. It doesn't have to be a camera. It could just be something poking us from our seat or something to remind us of doing something different. We're engineers at the end of the day. Gotta strive that innovation.
Yeah, maybe we can do something more simple. Maybe just have something that blinks off the screen, turns it off, and that will force you to kind of look aside or something like that. I think it's easier than.
Or what we could do is some companies do when for example you have a service and you pay for it, they just lower your opacity of the screen as time goes on, and then maybe that will make you squint and actually try and blink a little more. That could also be
when you try to focus, you blink less, if anything.
Yeah, I think in general it's interesting to explore how culture evolves here, how we as developers decided that we want to work with dark mode. I'll say personally, I prefer dark mode. That's my go-to. But the origins for that are not as organic as you might think. During my time in the army, an instructor came into one of the classes and literally said, "Everyone, switch now your IDEs to dark mode, and that's what you're using from now on." And I guess that's stuck. I still use dark mode today, and I most often prefer it. But that's not a very organic thing, right? So it's interesting to see how culture evolves, and this kind of always reminds me of the monkey cage story. You know that story. So the way it goes is there's an experiment. There's a cage with monkeys. And the scientists running the experiment, they throw in a banana into the cage. And anytime any of the monkeys try to touch the banana, they spray everyone with a cold shower of water. And they repeat it a couple of times till all the monkeys know that you shouldn't touch the banana. And then at that point, what they do is they gradually shift out the monkeys. They replace them. And so they put in a new monkey, they throw in a banana, and obviously that new monkey wants to touch the banana. But even before it's able to, all the other monkeys beat it up. And then you replace another monkey and you repeat the experiment until you get to the point where you have 0 monkeys that have been sprayed with water, but all of them know not to touch the banana. And I think there are a lot of things in our development culture, how we do how we do our conventions for our code, which mode of light mode or dark mode do we use, how do we style our code, how we do our documentation, how we do our architecture. All of these are deeply culturally influenced.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very it's interesting to see how we adapt to things that also are even sometimes trending. I mean, I feel like I'm the odd sheep here because I've never been like a dark mode fan. It was always the case of like, what has this website set as default, and that's something that I would use. I'd never go kind of out of my way to change it. So but definitely there is this trend that as soon as you start introducing something, as soon as something starts to gain that popularity, people start to follow, and then a few years later, it's just they're accustomed to using it, and they don't really maybe sometimes even know why. So that's quite cool. Anyway, let's jump on to another fact, and I'd love you, Shimon, to take this space and tell us something interesting from yourself.
Fact number 3. So, as someone who works at a company that caters to developers and engineers, and also recently attended a very interesting session by the co-founder of Netlify. So the fact that I'm saying is that, did you know that 90% of engineers end up dedicating their time to test a product, but never end up using it? It's an interesting phenomena where, on the one hand, companies, they were like, we have so much signups. It's so great. Those developers, they sign in and they try the product. Then few days later, why don't they come back? Where are they? Why they stop using the product? And my point is that it's not necessarily only because your product sucks. It's also because engineers are curious by nature and they like to try things and play with products. And for many people, what we do is actually our passion and not only our job. So sitting on a Saturday, browsing and signing into some cool new product that you don't have the need for, but you just want to see how it works. It's a thing, I guess.
Yep.
So you're saying it's not necessarily because it sucks, but it's most probably because it sucks, right? Well, no, I'm just kidding. Let's not take it that far, or maybe I don't know.
It's funny that Shimon mentioned this because I think on my iPhone currently 12 home screens I need to clear of apps that I'm testing. I completely understand.
And I think that this is one, like for maybe for the entrepreneur audience of us, or people who work at early stage startups, I think it's also one of the things to think about, like, not only what does my product do, but like, who does it solve it for, and who is the buyer, and what need am I trying to, fulfill with this product. And the interesting part for me was that sometimes it can coexist. So the co-founder of Netlify said they actually had 2 funnels. So the one funnel is you're a hobby developer, and on a Saturday, you just go and build this to-do blog just for fun and to see how it works. And then you experience okay, I've created 7 of those blogs in different platforms. Let's see how it's done here. And then if and when you like it, maybe 2 months later, you have a new project at work. And then you go like, we got to do this, but we only have 2 days and we can only execute if we have 2 days. And then you go like, oh, I tried this thing, this Netlify thing. I think I can do it, I think I have the tool for it. And then all of a sudden, your business use case is arising and you do it for your company. So it coexists in a way, I think.
I mean, I'd love to kind of take this opportunity to steal some knowledge from you, Shimon, and also from you, Or, because both of you are very successful, startup creators, and you're focused on developer tools and especially, appealing to developers. So that kind of trial period that we're talking about of developers testing a tool and then suddenly maybe deciding they do want to proceed with using it or not. How do you kind of see that in your eyes? What's kind of the best top tip here that we can kind of take from you to to learn how to maybe, grasp those developers and make sure that they don't kind of run out from our hands and from our little hags of the tools that we do offer?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First of all, I think a good place to start is with empathy. Like, how would you like to buy a product as a developer yourself? How would you like to interact with the product? And I don't know about you, but if someone, for example, calls me, my first reaction is to get upset. My second reaction is to get furious. And if you're trying to sell me something, I really go berserk. So all these cold approaches, trying to push your product on people, that's something that's too really old school, doesn't really apply today anymore. And I think as developers, we hate when people try to push products on us. So I think it's about the other way around. It's about making your product approachable. It's about using go-to-market strategies like product-led growth, PLG, in which you basically put the product out there, remove as much friction as possible, and get people to try it in the fashion that is relevant for them. And once you do that, you can start and see the growth and engagement of the product itself. And then you can double down on the things that work and gradually build the experiences that your audience actually wants.
Yeah, and I think I think without convincing, if someone does end up deciding that they want to go with a product, you're just going to end up having a much better customer who gives your product much more quality, because they're actually going to be using it and trying to find solutions that actually are relevant rather than just testing and doing whatever. Go for it, Shimon. I know you had something important there to say, so I'd love to hear it.
I think that there's an analogy that one of my employees, she gave me, about PLG. She said, I think that PLG is like when you go to a clothing store, and I go like, okay. So then you go in, and there are two different experiences. One experience is like the moment you step in the store, some seller jumps in, you're like, what do you need? How can I help you? Which shirt do you need? What is your size? And you're like, oh my God, just leave me alone. I just want to just browsing, just looking around. And then there's the exact same thing, only a different experience where you walk in, you go, you try one shirt, and then someone comes to you and tells you, hey, you want to see some similar shirts? Can I be of help to you? And they're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, can you show me what else do you have in the store? And then it's like, it's just the way you approach the customers and the way you do the communication is really the thing. Because at the end, it's the same store, same clothes, everything.
Yeah, I think communication is very important, and I'm interested because I know you, Danny, kind of mentioned an aspect on the fact that you have all these apps on your phone, and then you're testing them. So in this case, for example, looking at the analogy that Shimon just kind of gave us, what's your kind of take on the apps that you might have? Like which ones are you going to delete, and why are you going to stay with some? And I'm not talking specifically about the apps, but like what's kind of the motivating factor here for you to remain as a loyal kind of user of a product?
Lately, the apps I've been testing the most are note-taking apps, specifically Craft and Bear. I used to have Bear for a while, and it's really swift, it's quick, it's minimal, it's clean, and I loved it. Just to open, quickly take a note, go back. The tagging system as well. But after using that for 2 years, I noticed that my notes would be really, really long. And it did. For some reason, Bear does not allow us to have collapsible headers, right? So my notes would be really long. So then I switched to Notion because everyone was hyping Notion. Notion was way too slow for me. It would take a while to start up. And the fact that everyone started doing this whole how I organize my life in Notion, I just want to take a note, man. Like, leave me alone. When you start the app, it throws all these templates at you. And I'm like, no, I just want to remember the 5 bananas that mom asked me to buy.
If you just want to remember the 5 bananas you want to buy, why don't you just use Google Tasks to do? Like, you already have it in your phone.
On my Google Tasks, on my... I
6 app to check.
Google Tasks on my iPhone? Haram, bro. No.
It really does seem like when you're kind of doing something that the customer expects for your product, you will be off better in the long run if you just keep it organic and natural and kind of go with the flow. So many of times you probably have found yourself, sitting at a problem, trying to figure some solution out, whether it is a coding problem or whether something was, on your mind that, you had to find a solution to, whatever it might be. And actually, science comes into play here. That's quite interesting, and almost gives us maybe not a solution, but more of an advice of how you can get that thought process to kind of reignite again and spark those ideas to come into place. Now, one of the examples given by scientists is that by simply just taking a shower, you're able to kind of trigger a bigger part of your brain. Essentially all the neurotransmitters in your brain to give you that autonomous, like autopilot mode, essentially, because it's something that you're so used to doing, and the shower is the example here, that suddenly your brain becomes more active and you go into this creative mode where you can actually try and find a solution. Now, to give you a few more examples, the same thing might happen if you go for a walk, because it's something autonomous and it's something that you're very used to. Then your brain actually gets that, goes into that flow where you can start coming up with more ideas. Same thing happens with sleep. Now, I personally had this thing when I was younger. It doesn't happen to me too often now, and I'm quite sad it does not, because it almost felt too powerful. But essentially, it was I was faced with a problem in the evening. I wanted to solve that problem. I wanted to find a solution, and I just couldn't. For the sake of me, everything I tried, it just didn't work. And I said, I was like, oh, screw this. I'm fed up with this. Let me just go to bed and I'll try and figure out in the morning. For some reason or another, once I went to sleep and I woke up in the morning, whether it was memorizing a huge line of text or trying to find a solution, either I've dreamed about it or either I've came up with the solution as soon as I woke up. And then suddenly it was like a eureka moment in the morning, and I knew what I'm supposed to do. And I go up to my keyboard, I type the code, and suddenly it works. So your brain is quite powerful. And essentially, whether it comes to programming or anything else, once you can trigger that autonomous mode to yourself, so maybe even taking a break and going and doing something that's just, you're used to, can actually help you solve problems in tech, which is quite interesting.
Every office should have a shower. And I take it to the next level. I also served in the Israeli military in the IDF. And one of the best times was to go take shower with friends and talk in the shower. Shower talk, it's very good. Yes, each one like in the, you have the separation between them. And then you talk, sometimes it was really hot in the base and there was no AC. So you take a chair and you talk with each other, So I'm pro showers.
I mean, if we're talking about the shower idea, would you have a hot shower, or would you just make cold water available, like freezing cold? Because that can really make the difference in the way someone thinks, right?
We have a shower at work, but it's like for people who come with bicycle and stuff like that to take a shower. But I agree with Or, like when you go and you process stuff, and I agree with what you say also. When you go to sleep, it's like you have a cron job in your mind, and that it like spins it up, and you think about it, and you get a different perspective. I think it's the same, even if you go for a walk on the beach or you do something else, and all of a sudden, it's like it's counterintuitive. Instead of thinking really hard on the problem and trying to solve it, you need to let go, and then you have all the answers.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time, and have an awesome day.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it.